Welcome, everyone. We're loading you in from the queue this afternoon, and we're so excited that you have joined us. We want to welcome you from Operation Parent. I'm Michelle Massey, and we're here today with Dr. Terada out of Chicago, and we just can't wait to get started, and we're so thankful that you've taken some time out of your day to learn with us. We want to let you know our next webinar, we're going to have a registration link in the follow-up email that you get from this webinar. It'll also be posted on our website tomorrow. But we're super excited. It's going to be in July with Dr. Crystal Coyer out of Texas, and she's going to speak about age-appropriate prevention. So I hope you'll maybe make a little note on your calendar to get registered for that later this evening or tomorrow so that you don't miss it. It's going to be wonderful. Operation Parent's mission is to love and support parents by providing real-world information, connection, and most importantly, hope. We'd like to take you through a couple of the technical features so you can participate with us today. You're going to see up in the upper right corner an orange arrow. If you want to tap on that orange arrow and open up your control panel, I'll show you all the ways that you can be involved in today's program. You're each going to be muted during the presentation today, but you can deeply participate during the question section. That's about halfway down the control panel, and you're going to submit your questions there. They're going to come to us privately, and we'll make sure to read your questions out, and Dr. Terada will respond to those at the end of the program. You can submit them anytime during the webinar. As a question comes to mind, don't hesitate. Go ahead and queue it up in the question section for us for the end of the webinar. We have some amazing handouts set for you today. And if you just want to tap on the download button, you can download those while you're here with us, or you can check your email, the email that you registered for us. We did email those out to you directly this morning. Just make sure and check that email that you registered for the webinar with. So again, if you want to download them while you're here with us, if you're on your computer, it's a little tougher if you're on your phone, but just tap on the handouts and they're going to download for you to your computer and you can check them out. They're all quick, very quick, easy reads, and you will find them easy to understand and with great resources as a parent that you could start to implement with your teen in your home right away. You're going to get a recording certificate at the end of this webinar in the follow-up email. That's going to come within 24 hours of this webinar. If you're on the live webinar, you're going to get the certificate of attendance, and it's also going to be attached in the follow-up email. The email that you're going to get that contains that certificate of attendance also has a survey. That survey is only going to take you about 3 minutes to complete. Our audience has been so generous with that survey, and I want you to feel confident that we read every response and we utilize what you tell us that you're looking for in this webinar program. You're helping to support it and build it as we go, and we are a vibrant learning community, and we really feel your love and support as you give us feedback in that survey. And as you know and hopefully have seen, we utilize it. Now it is my distinct pleasure to introduce you to Dr. Erin Terada. She is a clinical psychologist with the OCD and Anxiety Center. She supervises all the clinical interns for her business, and she just mentioned that the interns are transitioning into their full-time jobs right now, and that she's going to miss them very much, but she has a very big role in training the incoming professionals into the community. She's also an expert in OCD, eating disorders, as well as anxiety. It's been a delight to talk with her about this topic and put this presentation together along the way. You're going to find her presentation engaging and delightful, just as she is. Many of you know Dr. Erin Weiner, and he established this introduction for us. I'm so thankful to him for doing it, and for Dr. Terada for being willing to work with us. Her practice is very busy right now, and she was still able to make the time to partner and work together, which we're really grateful for. And for those of you that are gardeners and animal lovers, that's what Dr. Terada likes to do for fun. And so thank you so much for being with us. We can't wait to hear everything that you're going to share with us today.
Thank you very much. I appreciate being a part of this and hope that we can give you some information today. Hi, I am Dr. Erin Terada. I have been practicing for about, I don't since 2006. So do the math, it's really early on a Tuesday. But yes, I do have 4 lovely fur children, as well as I am a highly dedicated gardener. Some people would call him obsessive, but I am just dedicated in my mind. I want to tell you a little bit more about the OCD and Anxiety Center. We've been open since about 2016 and actually just had our 6-year anniversary. We're out of Oak Brook and Orland Park, Illinois. We have 2 locations. We provide individual, family, and just parent-family coaching sessions for people who are dealing with OCD and anxiety-related issues. We offer telehealth, interstate. I myself am Psych PAC certified, so I can do national telehealth in various states, but we also offer in-person and something called intensives, which are sessions that are usually 3 or more times a week for 4 to 7 weeks to be able to deal with really intense anxiety, OCD, and other issues related to that, which is something really unique that we offer. We are based also in cognitive behavioral therapies, so CBT, ACT, DBT, all of those different things. We really do take a lot of time to really make an effort to, incorporate into our, practice, as well as for co-occurring issues with those. So things like eating disorder, substance abuse, depression, behavior disorders, all of those different things are part of what we also do treat alongside of the anxiety issues. So today, what I hope to be able to achieve are these 3 things. Is to be able to provide a foundational understanding of anxiety and how it manifests, and recognizing the observable signs in your teen's daily life, how to promote resiliency and how that plays a role in a way to have an adaptive response to anxiety, as well as learning how to change your communication and how that particularly can help support your loved one when anxiety is present. So let's get into it. First, want to kind of talk about anxiety in general. I want to be able to define these things for you because sometimes we get mixed up in terms of what is anxiety and what isn't. So the way that I would basically define anxiety is a feeling of worry, nervousness, unease, typically about something with an uncertain outcome. And this can happen even in the absence of knowing what the stressor is or the trigger is. Anxiety can present both as mentally, physically, and affectively or emotionally. But the thing that we forget often about anxiety is that it is a normal emotion and common human experience. That we have anxiety for a reason, just like we have sadness and happiness and anger. It's there for a reason and should be considered as such. Anxiety can serve to motivate and protect, as well as be an unpleasant consequence from something. So it can be adaptive and maladaptive. And this is something we're going to kind of continue to look at as we go on. So what is the difference between anxiety and stress, you may say? Well, let's look at that. Stress is how our bodies and brain responds to the big changes or situations in our lives. This also presents mentally, physically, and effectively. These changes that, again, we have with stress do not have to be negative or traumatic in order to be stressful. For instance, even positive things can produce stress, such as, hey, we're having a new baby. Hey, we're going to, get married, changing a job. All those things have stress. Going to a new school, starting a new activity. Those also are stressful experiences. So what is the difference then between stress and anxiety? And here's how I would simply put it with this kind of analogy. If we take kind of the idea of an egg, we're going to put these two things to the test with it. Stress is a response to external events. The origin is external. It is often time limited and has less impact on day-to-day functioning. So there might be an event that comes up that is a stress or a stressor. It is often an external thing like getting married, having a baby, moving, tests, things like that. Anxiety is a response to that stress, which is an internal sort of reaction. It's often an excessive reaction to stress or can persist after the event. And if we take that egg principle, stress is kind of putting pressure on the egg and cracking it with a vice. The outside pressure is pushing in. Anxiety is kind of like when you are boiling an egg and it overboils. And so then you get a really hard center. So it's after the stress has happened, the boiling, and it keeps cooking after that for a long time. So anxiety is kind of like boiling your internal egg, whereas stress is putting pressure on the outside shell. So there is definitely a difference between that. And we're going to talk about why that's needed in terms of that delineation. So another thing that both of these things do often get mixed up in is uncertainty. And the deal with uncertainty is it is a part of both of these, anxieties especially. But when I have to kind of talk about uncertainty, I usually explain it in this way. It's a state of not completely being confident or sure about something, as well as something's not able to be relied on or known for definite. A main aspect of this experience that can trigger or prompt, stressors to manifest anxiety is uncertainty. And the reason is we often try to make things certain that are uncertain when we are anxious. We want to be able to prepare, but we will always fail to do so. And I can tell you how in a very simple way. I'm going to tell you a story that can highlight this in a way that might be useful to sort of get into the nitty-gritty of uncertainty. So you go to a circus and you see the sideshow. Back in the old day, there used to be a guy outside the sideshow and he would say, come see all these, sideshows, these new, different, unique and creative, different sort of displays of weird and unusual things that would often be something that you would get curious about. They would have a mer woman, they would have a werewolf man, they would have a 600-pound lifting guy, and then they would show you this poster of a 6-foot man-eating chicken, and he's alive, and you can go see him right now. You can see the 6-foot man-eating chicken. We got him from the depths of the Amazon rainforest in South America, and he's scary. He can eat everybody, and you need to see him. You don't know. He might eat you. Just pay 25 cents, and he might eat you, and he might not. You may survive it. And so you're like, oh, that seems scary, but I got to see it. I don't know what that's like, but I need to see a 6-foot man-eating chicken. And you go into the tent, and there's this guy. His name's John. Says he's 6 feet tall, and he wants you to watch him eat some chicken. Well, what happened here? Did the guy lie? He kind of indulged on it, but did he lie? You saw a 6-foot man-eating chicken right there, and his name is John. What happened in the beginning is something called imagined uncertainty-based issues versus the reality of what happens. This is kind of par for the course in uncertainties as well as in anxiety and fear when that comes out. When we kind of get really worried or anxious to the degree that we can't really function, the thing is we're dealing with an imagined uncertainty based issue versus a reality. And you knew that you were going to go see a 6-foot man-eating chicken, but you didn't really think of all the factors that led into the reality of meeting John, who really likes chicken. And this is why. Anxiety is based in uncertainty for these reasons. But uncertainty has two different types. So in one way, uncertainty is not necessarily a bad thing, and I want to kind of get that through to you too. It's the ways uncertainty can play in our mind that is. There are uncertainties that we do know that we will have an understanding of. So for instance, an uncertainty that you can find some issue, and resolve it is the things like, will it rain tonight? Are the Cubs going to win tonight? Again, I'm from Chicago. I always have hope in that area. Or a common one with kids, will I pass this test today? These all have obtainable factual information. You may have to wait through it, but you will have obtainable factual information. You will know later that night if it rains. You will know after the game if the Cubs win, which they will in my mind. You will know whether or not your child passes this test because you will get the results later. The things that are not are, let's change those questions to this. Is it going to rain tonight because I forgot my umbrella? If I wear my unlucky socks, will the Cubs lose? Will I fail the test today because the teacher doesn't like me? This is unobtainable information and based in emotional doubts. We can't prove that because you didn't bring your umbrella that it's going to rain. We can't really prove, whether or not your unlucky socks made the Cubs lose. And we can't really prove because the teacher didn't like me, that's why you failed the test, in all certainty, okay? So again, some certainties are knowable or not. The imagined-based uncertainties are the ones that we really want to focus on today because they are the ones that create some of the issues on being able to cope with some of the things in our uncertain times right now. So let's talk about what that looks like for you and when you see it in your teen. The maintenance of anxiety and what kind of manifests it and gets it going are these things when I talk about physical, mental, and emotional responses. Physiologically, you may find that your teenager or adolescent kid is, showing that they have signs of a lot of headaches, stomach and IG issues. They feel their rapid heartbeat happening. Oh, my heart's beating out of my chest. Feel like they can't breathe. They might say that they can't sleep at night. They have poor appetite and concentration issues. They might give you a lot of uncertainties, but more in those imagined unknowns, like, well, what if I don't do this? Or what if this happens? Those catastrophic outcomes. They might have difficulty making a decision and have a hard time making a decision to the point where they don't make one. They may question or get concerned about things. They may use emotional reasoning. Well, because I'm having, anxiety, that means I'm going to fail at this. Or like, I'm just not prepared enough. And the reason why I failed was because I was just too worried about the outcome. They might have irrational doubts. Again, those what ifs, but really going to really unknowable places. They also may show a range of different moods. Anxiety doesn't necessarily look one way or the other. It may look like somebody who's irritable or frozen and shut down and stuck in a place. They may look like they're actually nervous and meet sort of what we consider for us what would be a moment of anxiety. They may be hesitant to, again, take action or say something. They may often come across as sometimes demanding and sometimes passive. And often there also is this element of aggressiveness. So if I get really, really nervous, you may see kids getting aggressive towards objects or themselves because they can't get through the anxiety from the stressor. So we can have a range of different things, and knowing your teen's specific range of what they would produce when their anxiety is really key in this as well. So what actually creates these kind of like reactions? These are some of the stressors that we have to consider and some of the things that might be internal worries that continue as well as outside stressors that can actually place an importance in their life. Often nowadays, teens have a really high pressure to compete both internally and externally with peers and, athletics, academics, and other things. The pressure to plan for the future that, there's many kids that I treat with anxiety and OCD who, really feel once they start and hit off in, high school, that that's the big time. And that is going to be the thing that, like, if they don't maintain straight A's and do perfect and all the extracurricular activities, if they don't get into the college they want, then they're failing. They're failing the rest of their life. And again, that pressure is huge, and that's somebody with clinical anxiety, but think about how much pressure there may be externally to plan as well as internal source. This may come from something such as unrealistic expectations. To maintain a certain GPA that in 4.0 isn't good enough, 5.0 higher. Maybe having a rigid mindset, an A is the only thing that I can achieve, not an A minus, not a B, it has to be an A. And overscheduling activities. So not only are they really enjoying dance class, they're in 4 different varieties of it, and they're also at dance camp, and they're doing several competitions a week, and they're doing, private coaching for dancing. And then they expect that they're going to have time to finish their homework, and then their kid is up till 1, 2 a.m. finishing homework, and that they have to do all these things. There's also a sense of also unhealthy comparison from either that teen sometimes, as well as from outside. There's pressure and unhealthy comparison. So grades, athletics, extracurricular, and social media use all play a role in these things, such as if, Johnny is often hearing that, a bunch of his friends are doing better in athletics from either parents or other, teachers and coaches, that, they may compare themselves that they're not doing as well and they need to meet that standard. Or if Susie is doing like 5 extracurriculars and your kid's only doing like 1, they may feel a little awkward because 5 is better than 1, or it's like, why can't I keep up with that and my grades? As well as the comparisons that can happen all too often and very quickly on social media with other teens and different things that happen, and it's very, very reinforcing and quick, that it can become very confusing over time. So we want to make sure we don't have these things going on. This may lead to what I call kind of the Houdini methods of what could happen, which also are the escape behaviors. So if we feel that pressure, if we're putting it on ourselves or from outside sources, we may often, in place of anxiety, want to escape it because it feels really awful, or we don't know that we can handle it. So people may start to engage, and teenagers are not above this, in reassurance seeking. That is everything going to be okay kind of question, and am I a good kid? And really questioning and getting concerned and asking often, or asking for your help in some way to say that they're a good kid or to get that A. They need to see that on paper. They may flat out avoid. They may sleep a lot. They may actually avoid going to school. They may avoid going to activities, being out with peers, because it causes too much anxiety. They may avoid actually having any contact with family, isolate. Distraction. Social media seems to be one of the bigger ones. I'm just going to scroll into social media, TikTok and, Insta as much as I can. And that may be what I do to distract, or watch Netflix forever and ever. And then I don't get the things done that I need to in the home or even at school or in my extracurriculars. But I'm trying to just not be anxious. And lastly, numbing out. This can include, things like substances, as well as self-harm behaviors, eating disorders, and various other activities that kind of like allow us to not feel anything. But if we're trying to numb out anxiety, it's not just a one single thing that we can numb out. We numb out usually everything. So anxiety, happiness, joy, anger, sadness, everything. But there are escapes. So in one way, here's tips on kind of how we can reduce those escape behaviors, meaning if you do see your teenager engaging in one, some of the things that I commonly see that need to be introduced are this, is not giving in to your teen's demands. So if they demand something, that you do it for them because they can't, they're too anxious or this or that, don't give in to the demands, or they'd rather do this or that's too difficult. We're not going to do that. We're going to stop decreasing responsibilities or taking them over for them, that they're too anxious, therefore now their whole life structure changes, that they don't need to do their chores as usual, or meet this certain expectation with grades, or going out out for some team practice, or other things that we're asking them to do, or do it for them. We need to stop minimizing attempts to set limits for unwanted behaviors. So that may mean if we're decreasing responsibilities or taking them over, we're going to stop minimizing, really sort of holding our teenager accountable for not getting the things that they need to get done. And we may limit, kind of our attempts to sort of basically, set limits or give consequences for unwanted behaviors in the house, like isolating, talking back, demanding certain things. We're not going to provide, special treatment or excuses. We're also going to continue to discuss upsetting and uncomfortable topics with and in front of your teen. We're not going to bubble them up because, again, that just creates more escaping behaviors, as well as attempting to protect or rescue them from personal responsibilities or negative outcomes. So if, again, and we'll talk about this a little bit more, we're finding ourselves doing these things because of our teenagers' anxieties, we need to kind of look at what we're doing and how we're creating a behavior pattern that may not be useful or helpful for them through this anxiety or further on. So here's where I want to kind of make the point of like, not all anxiety is really clinical grade or needs to be taken into a clinic or somewhere for intensive help. It may be short durations and it may be intensely, under the realm of severity, excuse me, where it needs a very clinical, treatment-oriented, structured approach. So when does it become something where we see it as a clinical impairing, aspect of anxiety or worry or issue? We really look at three basic things, which are the duration, how long. If it lasts for a couple of days, okay. If it lasts for a couple of weeks, months, longer, then we may want to look at whether that person needs help more than what we can provide. The frequency, if it was one episode of anxiety or a short duration of a couple hours of being worried versus like it's going on for months, and pretty much throughout the entire day, it might need to have somebody else kind of help in clinically. Severity, how intense. It may have started in one place and have gotten, really, really intense, more demanding, more yelling, more hiding, isolating, getting to places where we know that intensity is going upwards and more often, as well as when it starts to really place a mark on functional impairment for that teenager. Academic, their social life, personal responsibilities go out the window. That is something that, again, we need to look at. So even on a smaller scale, anxiety can be helpful and also harmful, adaptive, maladaptive. But when it actually has an impediment on our ability to function in our day-to-day life, even for your teenager, that's when we need to make a decision to go seek out further treatment. As well as I'd like to point out, it being non-normative for their age. Most of the times you'll see, at least I do in my practice, that, when somebody is anxious or really has very severe anxiety, you will see them kind of go to their last stage of mastery. So you might see them actually start to become more immature in ways in how they deal with things, wanting, kind of, again, more reassurance in ways that they may have sought it out in the past at a younger age. Or they may seem to be, kind of like very stoic and sort of aging up and not having any emotions and feel like they are parentified and they need to, help other people with that. So, one thing that we need to consider is like, is this sort of non-normative for what their age would be and where I would probably see that they would be, needing that. I also wanted to make kind of a point in, especially in the last couple of years, I would say, the uncertainty that's the biggest, that has been around is, generally around COVID, as well as all the other things that recently are going on in the news. We see often people in our practice that, out of the blue have started developing more OCD and specific phobias and other areas that they normally felt were okay. But these are markers of really high grade clinical anxiety. Other things that can come with it is developing panic disorder, but also eating disorder and body focused repetitive behaviors such as hair pulling, skin picking, things like that. And again, these are for certain reasons why this happens in teenagers or younger kids, but these are often co-occurring issues or some things that can happen, as a result of long-term clinical anxiety, or again, just some of the things that can be some of those impediments to being able to deal with uncertainty can grow into this. And it's not saying that every kid who's anxious is going to be this way. It's just saying these things exist. And if you already have a predisposed family sort of notion that this is in your family history, any of these issues on the bottom that are asterisked, or you're starting to see signs of things that go beyond, you may need to, get an evaluation to get checked for these things. So just keep that in mind, that these are some of the ways that we can deal with anxiety that don't seem especially like it's just that thing. So gave you a lot of information, and here's what I would say about that. Hope is not lost. There's ways that even if you're seeing the duration go up, frequency, there's unrealistic expectation, there's a lot of anxiety happening all the time in your home, and you're in this situation where you're like, there's so much stress going on in our lives right now, I don't know what we can do to help. And I'm here to say there's things you can do, and there's things that you can do starting today to help, which is amazing. So let's get at it. So what can we do? Well, I have kind of three things I want to highlight. One is we're going to do these three key strategies in a way where we're going to set up the environment to be helpful so that it can sort of bolster against some of those anxieties and worries. We're going to institute the 3 S's to respond to things, and we're going to talk about that building resiliency thing that I mentioned before that's really important in this. So let's start with the environment. I often tell people when they are going into this that one of the things that really is a key strategy in helping is being able to keep up an environment that has 3 components in it: structure, consistency, and predictability. When those 3 things are maintained, that is something that a kid or a teenager, or pretty much anybody, I would even include adults, can thrive in, families can thrive in. So what do I mean by this? So with structure, we're going to keep a scheduled routine as much as impossible we can. So take, for instance, when the lockdown with COVID happened. One of the things that happened very quickly for many teens and many kids is the structure that they knew was gone. The structure of school, what they could expect, a scheduled routine of a day of classes and what they had to do after school, that was gone. So they had to create their own structure with the things that they knew, and sometimes that didn't go so well. We also need to consider in that structure with a schedule that we have household expectations, rules, and set limits. And part of that, again, is if you've gone away from household expectations, rules, and setting limits because of just, again, everything going on, we need to get that back. And I would say especially it's relevant for right now, the structure as well as the expectation and the rules, because we're going into summer where school's going to be out. So we need to figure out a way, either at home or setting up things like camp and other stuff, that we can have those expectations there. We also want to provide consistency. So we want to maintain that structure in a sensible way, not necessarily a rigid way or a lackluster, kind of laissez-faire way. We want to be able to set it up in a way that makes sense for our household, for our needs. And whatever you set up, whatever you put out there, you must maintain. So it's not setting up the structure just for the convenience of that time, and then once the anxiety or worry or difficulty is over, then we go back to what we normally do. This is for the long haul. And again, your kids are thriving off of structure and consistency, in their day-to-day life at school before COVID, they're going to after. So we need to provide consistency in what we do. We also need to make that consistency predictable and that environment predictable so that in the future, your responses will be reflected of the framework that you set up, that your team also has a clear understanding of what is expected. So in a way, we want to create these 3 things to bolster against some of the stuff that, again, is creating some of those uncertainties. These can be knowable certainties or uncertainties really quick because we will set up the framework that needs to happen for them. Now, I also have one of the handouts that goes over a bit more on how to do these things and what to expect, but really keeping this as a key element of it is going to be the first thing. So set up the environment for that. So now you have to set up the environment, you have those things straight. Now we need to deal with responses. Decision making and responses can sometimes be an aspect of, like, if we're worried about, things making somebody anxious, or, how they're going to react to a certain stressor, or even just requests and different things. If we're setting limits or making different rules, I want you to put it up against the 3 S's. So this is to make it safe, sensible, and stable. So what does that mean? In terms of safety, does this decision that you're about to make maintain everybody's safety physically, mentally, effectively, in a way that's like realistic? We can't rescue them from it, but are they going to get really unsafe? And we need to do that check. Is there factual evidence for this? that we can, or are we in our own imagined feared scenario that this is going to be unsafe, things are going to get bad? The one key thing that I would ask you to do is to try to like look for what ifs in sort of your thinking or language. And that would be a key thing of like, an imagined feared scenario. Is it sensible? Does this decision and response make sense given the circumstances? If I set a limit for, not doing chores, does it make sense to have a response that is, really, I'm taking away your phone for the rest of the month because you didn't do your chores this week? That doesn't really make sense. We might need to sort of like consider other things in that. Well, you didn't do your chores this week, so you're not going to have your phone for another week or until you get them done. Might be more sensible given the circumstances. And stable. It's not likely to give away or overturn already set rules or choices, meaning it's not going to create that consistency break or be unpredictable. It is firmly fixed in that framework that you created, and checking, is this going to be something that I want to do right now because it's impulsive and I need to do it right now, or is it going to be something that can be held up in the long term? Again, we need to make sure that we have these things in place so that it just makes sense when we are making a decision or responding to things, that we have this, kind of mentality at our mindset, keyed into this at any time. So let's talk about that other aspect, resilience. The way that I would actually coin this or define it would be our ability in the presence of challenges to bounce back, or our rubber bandness, our ability to kind of bounce back in a way, as you see that hand. And resilience is a really key thing in some of these strategies to build and to sort of manifest in a lot of ways when anxiety and stressors are present. What resilience isn't is it doesn't mean that the hardship or distress doesn't ever occur. We're still going to have those things. We're still going to have uncertainties. We're still going to have anxiety. It's a normal human emotion, right? It means that when we have resiliency or we build it, that they have the coping skill to go through that there are things within your determined set of ways of how to deal with that stressor that you have to be able to bounce back. Resiliency can be innate, so you can find that certain people have a certain honed in sense of their own resiliency that they already just put in, but it also can be learned. So again, knowing kind of your own sense of your own bounce back or how much your kid bounces back is probably going to be something that's going to be key in sort of understanding how to build more resiliency. And you may say, like, how does this happen? What do we do? How do we build this if we don't have it innately? Well, there are very key things that you can do to help with building resiliency. And we're going to go through them here. Sorry about a little bit of the wonkiness, but that's some of the uncertainty. So resilience building for teenagers, as well as I would say even younger, is very key. So we want to validate their behavior based on the process, not the outcome, meaning avoiding giving praise only during positive outcomes. So Johnny has a baseball game and he wins that baseball game. And so we give him praise and validate him. Good job, you won that game. Great, Johnny. But then what happens when he doesn't win a game, or in fact doesn't win a lot of games? If we're only validating the outcome, then we're really showing Johnny that the only time that he does something well is when he actually accomplishes the process or the outcome that we like, or a positive outcome. This may make Johnny actually more keen to really trying to be aware of how much he can win and how much, again, your praise or love is based on what he can actually achieve. However, if we praise the process of it, so Johnny studies a lot for this test and really struggles, gets extra help, spends a lot of hours and still ends up getting a B when he really wanted that A, but he got a B. We can still give him validation and say, good job, you worked really hard on that. You did so well. I recognize all of the time that you put into studying for that. Even if the outcome is not excellent, that you're still praising them based on that. That is a really key thing to think about. And if we keep this going, then you're going to create a kid who actually has more confidence not just in the outcomes or the recognition and the only times that they're actually sort of like, seen in their achievement, but versus the effort they put in. And that kid's going to be more confident to try new things or to go out there and really challenge themselves because they're more invested in sort of what they can learn from the process than achieving a certain outcome. We want to give support when asked, if appropriate. So we're not going to assume that our kid or our teen cannot do the task on their own. We're not going to rescue them out of it. So we're going to allow for room to accomplish a task, and we're going to have them do it on their own. And we're going to do that before asking them if they need support or help. We may want to step back and watch their attempts first before even offering help, and that still may not be actually needed. So we want to consider that even our offer can be rebuffed, and that's okay. That's actually helping them build that resiliency on their own. We need to allow for negative outcomes. We need to let them fail and feel it. I want you to think about that. We need to let them fail and feel it. We need to allow for all types of outcomes, and especially in children and adolescents, this is a very, very key way that they learn, and you did the same. Even if you don't want to see your kids in distress or upset, it may be the thing that can help them prepare better and get them through the unwanted outcome. And I have not seen one teenager or one person, one child, one adult, nobody really succumb and fail and die from having a negative outcome, in this respect. So failing a test, failing, getting onto a team, they won't die from that, and they will survive getting through an unwanted experience. Oh, and the last one, let me go back, was to say as you do. So we're going to model what we're asking for. So if we're asking our kids to do these things, we also need to kind of take that time to see like how anxious we are. If we are putting out there unwanted kind of, sort of like issues or other anxieties into the mix, we need to demonstrate resiliency on our own. We need to show this at home. We need to be self-aware. We need to be able to tolerate the unknown when it happens. We need to make choices that show that we can have a capacity to weather the storms of life. And when we model this, our kids are going to have another external sense of being able to manage that in a better way. So other people who are watching, I know that there's, schools and sort of other community people. How can community and schools help? I think this is also another big buffer in sort of being able to be an auxiliary support for a teen. And there's definitely ways that you can help that are very easy. So I kind of want to sort of label this the STAT approach. And if you find that there's a stressor that's happening and we need to sort of approach it, I usually ask people in the beginning to start off with those trauma-informed care approaches in sort of addressing the issue at hand, which would be the first three, or the first two actually, of the core sort of like factors of trauma-informed care, which would be safety, trustworthiness, and transparency. So we need to create safety. Often this might be, again, having consistent, realistic, predictable messages that we put out there, policies, approaches that maintain safety, not just for the teens, parents, but also the staff involved. We need to make sure that we, create something that sort of like insulates from that initial like blowback of the situation. Trustworthiness. We need to think ahead of the message that we're sending and how to best reduce those escape behaviors that can happen. We're going to communicate this in a way that the person can understand. So either in their primary language or multiple languages, being able to check back and clarify, like what did they hear, kind of how we're going to get that across. And that is going to also be a part of the transparency. So we're going to be open. We're not going to hide things, even if it's hard for the teenager or family, but we're going to make sure that, you're attempting to get across is clear, as well as clarify that. So it may be sort of asking like, so what did you hear? Or do you have any questions about that? Or does that make sense for you? And see if there's any points that weren't addressed or things that aren't seeming so clear in this situation that we really do need to make a transparent sort of form of approach towards a stressor. In practical ways, here's what I would really, really encourage, schools as well as other community resources to advocate for, particularly long-term outcomes, not just right now outcomes. So even if it's going to be hard in the short term, we want to advocate for those long-term outcomes. We want to be able to work with others who are currently helping the teen and family. I love it when I talk to schools. I love it when I talk to community supports that the family and the teen uses, because then that kid's going to get more of a consistent message and support and wraparound services. And that builds so much more hope and possibility for resiliency than ever. So work with the other people who are currently working, with the team if you know them. As for in that academic environment, we want to have the student do the work first before anybody else. Meaning, if the parents are contacting teachers and counselors in the school for support that the team can accomplish, writing emails, getting exceptions for classes, doing that work, we want to also, again, with that parent, to reinforce the teen doing this on their own as much as we can. So it might look like a teacher or counselor reaching out to the parent and be like, great, when I hear from, Johnny about, the test or some of the concerns, I would be glad to talk to him in class or even over email about what this would look like. Again, we don't want to sort of be promoting any rescuing or protection of the kid when they can do it just because they're anxious. And for a large haul this year, I've seen a lot of people go into 504s to address just anxiety. And here's what I would say about that. In some ways, we can first initially create a 504 that can address anxiety, meaning if we are looking at, things like school refusal or panic disorder or other things that are, having functional impairments in school, we may need to, make accommodations for them in some ways. And some of those may be actually appropriate and some may not be. So we want to look at, what's going to be helpful for them. And especially a key thing in this that I found often in the past couple of years is looking at timelines, when to reduce to be clear or end out the 504 accommodations instead of keeping it a running thing. We need to do that. We also need to make it a point to have the student or teen in the meeting with the parents and not just the parents there, getting the student feedback from the person who's actually experiencing that anxiety is going to be key in how we might approach it. So again, 504s aren't bad. Even if an IEP meeting needs to be done every year because one's already established, we need to kind of look at how, if we're incorporating newly brought up anxiety issues, is going to be sort of phased in and out of that, or what are we going to do with that? We just don't want a 504 to be accommodating forever and then it becomes another thing that we have to undo. So you may be saying, how can parents help? And here's how I want you to help in the ways that we can improve communication and building that resiliency and all those things. It really does come down to communication at the forefront. Again, we want to normalize anxiety. It is normal. It is a normal human emotion, just like anything else. We need to treat it as such, and it is okay to have anxiety. I want you to be aware of your own reactions too. Again, if we need to take that self-awareness and we need to say as we do, we need to kind of do these at times where we're not really worked up and saying things, or again, having a reaction that is not going to be conducive. If we're really overly anxious, we may not be able to clearly hear and communicate what we want to, or set a limit and react in a way that we really should be. We want to ask clarifying opening questions. So in your communication, what I would ask you to do is really use, what, how, when, and where if you do need to ask a question, not something that would get you a one-word answer. So do, would, should, could. Even if you have to go over it in your head and think about, would you be able to answer this question with a yes or a no? Think about when you ask, again, what, not what if. And we'll go again, what ifs are not the place we need to go. But what do you think about what just happened? How do you expect to get, through this new, stress? When would you want to be able to do something about that? And where would it be helpful for, support? Or where would it be helpful to start? What is your thoughts? We also want to listen to their experience. We don't need to talk over or talk every time. We can just listen. And that may be a key thing. What we may think are the things that are producing anxiety or that they're worried about is not necessarily what they're worried about. So for instance, with some of the new things that have recently come out with school shootings, we may need to listen to what they're concerned about or listen to their experiences, and what they may be worried about may not be the same thing that you're worried about. So just listening is the key first primary aspect of all of this. Even if it feels like it's giving you a reaction, you're going to monitor, but just listen. Not saying anything can be the biggest form of validation, and actively listening, not sitting there on a phone or doing something else, actively listening and looking and making eye contact can be so powerful for so many people. I also feel like being direct when you share your concerns is going to be helpful. This means observable behavior or the impact on your teen's functioning is going to be evidence-based facts. You know, Susie, I noticed like you've been sitting in your room most of the day, every day after school, and we've called you out of, school more than once over the past 2 weeks. I think I counted, it was about 5, 6. And this is starting to concern me because your teachers are also, trying to reach out to you, and they've reached out to me. And this is, something that I'm, wanting to sort of talk to you about, and concerned that maybe we need to do something different with. Is better than, kind of like, I'm worried that you're worried, or like, I know you're having anxiety, and I'm not really sure why, but I see a bunch of stuff and we need to we need to do something about this. They can speak to those observable, behaviors or the impact on their functioning. They can't speak to your own anxiety in that moment. We want to, again, validate their emotions, not unhealthy responses. So we don't want to validate, like, I know you've been really anxious and wanting to like sleep a lot and withdrawing from friends, and I get that, that happens, is probably not going to be as effective as like, I see that you're anxious and I want to support you and we're going to get through this. If you want my help, I'm here. Is going to be building their resiliency more to be able to speak up, to communicate, to ask for the things that they need, then really just validating the unhealthy responses of like, I know when I'm sad, I just kind of like isolate and sleep a lot or do this. So I figure, you're sad or you're anxious and doing the same. So we want to be able to do that. If I had to kind of extend out some other resources for this in ways that we can kind of give you further help, the first 2 books at the top are things that actually I really, really rely on a lot when I look at teenagers or families that really need help in sort of, bracing against, anxiety and how to help. The first one is Treating Childhood and Adolescent Anxiety by Leibowitz. This book was actually one of the first ones that I read about, kind of how to help a parent. And it is very thorough and understanding, and written in a way that you can understand, in a way that gives you very good ways of how to change your responses and behaviors and communication. Helping Your Anxious Teen, Positive Parenting Strategies to Help Your Teen Beat Anxiety, Stress, and Worry by Josephs is really good as well, in sort of giving you sort of practical sort of steps and strategies on how to help with positive parenting techniques. Resources too that I would really want you to look into if you had further curiosities about this. One of my handouts that I gave to you is from the Anxiety Depression Association of America. This is one of the bigger, anxiety, sort of resources that we have, that is dedicated to sort of mood, but particularly ways of helping with anxiety, OCD, panic, and things like that, not only in kids, but is also for adults. Looking into this website, you're going to find a lot of information on both, and the co-occurrence of anxiety and depression, as well as a lot of really good supportive resources. The International OCD Foundation, again, not all anxiety is OCD, but they do also have different strategies for dealing with momentary anxieties and uncertainties. Particularly this link for the kids sections for parents getting to understand kind of anxiety and OCD and how to help is really key. One that everybody does know about, the Child Mind Institute, which is, something that I also give parents, and I don't doubt that you guys have kind of gone, to this site or been asked to go to this site before. It is always a useful resource, as well as looking at the space treatment protocol. Again, the first book, Treating Childhood and Adolescent Anxiety, comes from this program, which is called Supportive Parenting. for anxious childhood experiences. It's a treatment protocol that we use at our practice, as well as that you can find across the country, that really deals with how you respond to anxiety in the moment as a parent and how you can start shaping that differently. And their website has a lot of good resources and information on it as well to kind of go through. As well as going to, honestly, plug this place. I've read all of Operation Parents Handbook, and talking with Michelle and everybody there, I have found this to be not only one of the very good, resources, but even looking at the children, versions, as well as, some of the things that I've talked about, I also found echoed in, this parent handbook, and it is a very, very good handbook. Particularly some of the things, based in the elementary childhood handbook seem very on par with most of like what I do in my practice, as well as, a lot of other people in sort of our line of work really try to teach parents on how to help. So I would go look at it, order it, see what you can get out of it. It really can help support, getting communication going and understanding mental health in youth, on a different level that can be so, so helpful. So I thank you all. I really hope you enjoyed, kind of the things that I put out there, the little nuggets of wisdom, that I gave you. If you wanted to reach me more, and had any other questions in the future, the first is my direct email and phone number. If you wanted to learn more about, the OCD and Anxiety Center, we have our addresses, our website, and the intake line. You can also follow us on social media. If you go to our website, you can get a prompt really quickly to sign up for our newsletter, and immediately you can go and start looking at all of our blogs and resources that we have based on anxiety, and OCD, as well as other co-occurring disorders that we treat, and tips and tricks on how to do all the things you need to do to help. So I thank you all very much.
That was awesome, Dr. Terada. You packed so much information
I know,
in
I do.
this. You did. It was so good. I was taking, even though we've gone through the presentation before, I still took brand new notes this time around too. So thank you so
Mhm.
much. And I want to echo and ask the audience to make a note to make sure they go check out the blog section on your website, the OCD and Anxiety Center. There's great information and continued learning power there. So put a note on your handouts or wherever you can, in the back of your head if you're on your phone and trying to move around at this point in time. The other thing I meant to make a little plug in the beginning, but just in case you haven't had a chance to check out the handouts yet. One of them is titled Tips on Creating a Structured, Consistent, and Predictable Home. And you went deeply with that in your presentation, but that's going to be an awesome handout for families to have at home and just be reminded of what you taught us
Mhm.
today. We've got lots of questions, so I can't wait to dig into those.
Bring 'em on.
We'll cover a lot of great ground here. An easy, quick one is: does your office offer services in Spanish?
Currently we do not, but we're looking at multilingual language, providers that can. So that is definitely something that I can take back to the practice. Um, I would love to be able to offer, kind of, you're seeing one of my fur babies right now congratulating me. This is Elvis. I would
Aw,
love to be able to offer, kind of bilingual or multilingual. If we can't, we will do as much as we can to try to find, people who are similarly versed in anxiety and OCD created practices that can offer, various language, supports, because I think getting treatment in the language that, is your primary language is very key to being able to feel like you have the confidence to get through it. So,
definitely.
yeah.
Well, I did want to let folks know I'll talk a little bit more about the handbooks in just a moment, and thank you for introing the audience
Hmm.
to the OP handbook. But we do have an elementary and a middle and high version of our parent handbooks. If those would be helpful for folks, you can check those out online. Um, the next batch of questions are really great and flow right into your content. Um, One parent asked, how do you avoid rescuing a teen when he is in freeze mode? So he might go into that mode for 15 minutes or more, and then has a routine of escaping to his phone from that mode. So, would you have some resources or some thoughts for the
Yeah.
family?
So first, if somebody's in a high amount of anxiety and they're kind of going into that freeze mode, right? That's the time where we're not going to really have a lot of conversation, because I don't remember like the last time that I was really stressed or anxious. Anybody that said anything to me in that moment or was, really, explaining things, I probably didn't remember. And if you think to the last time when you were really stressed, like you're kind of cutting off sort of ability to think. So what I would suggest, if you do see him frozen, what I would do is, again, not speak, not sort of like explain or set a limit or rescue him out of it. It is 15 minutes. He will come down. However, it may need to be like, let's take some time afterwards. When you're ready, can we talk? And this may mean like, we're going to take away our phone and do something that we need to do to kind of recover from this. It doesn't mean speaking to me, but what can you do to kind of come down from it? And then when you're ready to speak, come find me. But we're not going to distract into our phone. So there may need to be a conversation ahead of time of that, like, hey, Johnny, I noticed like when you get frozen or stuck like this, it's really hard to help you or know what's going on. So what if we see these signs again, such as you like not talking, not looking at us, not speaking, not responding, and look like you're frozen, we're probably going to sort of take away your phone. When you're ready, you can have it back, but we're going to expect like it's not going into your phone and distracting from things. We're going to take a moment after you're out of the high anxiety to see what we can do to help, and sort of even maybe pre-plan for the next time too, in that conversation. So I would kind of, again, in that creating that structure or plan, set those expectations ahead of time, sort of like really think about what happens with your teenager, and kind of pre-set up some things. And again, it may not work. That's the time then we go back and we kind of reset it. So when you are this way and the last thing we did didn't work, what would you want to do? And if they say just want to be on my phone, that's not a reasonable expectation. And that doesn't seem to be something that's going to be stable over time or safe for anybody. They're just going to go into escape behavior. So we may need to have some creative decision making that, either it is, if you're getting frozen because of a certain thing, and we need to help you, sort of support you on getting through this thing. It depends on kind of the function of the behavior. So if we need to address like the phone seems like a distraction after you're having a hard time, then that's what we're talking about, and we're not going to shy away from that conversation.
That's
Um,
awesome. I'm glad you also gave us the opportunity to try it several different times. I mean, you indicated
it's
like
going
it's
to
not
happen.
going to go smoothly
It's not.
the first couple of times, and it may take a while to adjust that habit. So that hope that we can keep trying and go at it from a couple of different angles and
Mhm.
try a lot of different options and strategies until you find one that works.
It's going to be a key thing in this. Again, we don't want to create the same rigid mentality, and how we're trying to, help the situation with the same rigid mentality that started the situation. So
Yeah,
we need to
good,
be a little
great
bit more
point.
flexible.
Great point. Um, so this is a pretty deep but great question. How do you help your teen build resilience who has experienced constant failures academically and socially? He anticipates failure and has a hard time believing that he could have a good time or success at school.
So this may be a kid where I would say one where we may need to go get him clinical help. If it's really, again, that duration has been happening for a long time and experiencing repeated failures, as well as having those reinforced, this may be somebody who might need clinical support in some way to build some skills. Not necessarily that they, can't, they just may need somebody outside of just basic, kind of family, kind of support to help you as well as, your kid learn different ways. Because if you've repeatedly tried over and over and it hasn't worked, then maybe kind of asking somebody else to be in the situation. That may not need to be for long term, but it may give you a guidance of how to approach it differently. I hate to say it, some of the things that happens with anxiety and a lot of times with, certain very strong emotions with repeated kind of like, experience of really strong anxiety or stress, and it seems like your kid may be, achievement, fixed on, accomplishing something instead of the process, and that may get reinforced over time. So my first thought would be like, going and seeing if outside help can help, even just in an outpatient clinic, just learning a couple of skills. But again, learning how to not, just get him so outcome oriented, but process oriented, is definitely something that we need to start validating, so that is really the thing that would probably be focused on.
Mm, so good too to also kind of reframe like what that success might look like. Like maybe
Hmm.
there's a smaller success that happens to help build
Yeah.
confidence, like an unbiased person could really help stair step that confidence building and experiencing some good feelings at school.
Right. Or notice like an unrealistic expectation or outcome that, you guys haven't picked up on your own.
Oh, yeah, good point. Yep, sometimes we're focused on the wrong things, so it's good
Mhm.
to have someone re refocus. Um, okay, another family has minimalized their daughter's responsibilities based on this presentation. She knows that that shouldn't be the first reaction, um, but there is OCD, anxiety, and also depression
Mhm.
that they're working through. So, what are some strategies or advice you might have there?
Depending on kind of where anxiety and OCD is, some of the things that we may need to consider are, our responses to and helping, a kid with anxiety, and especially OCD, is if OCD is getting in the way, then we may need to have actually somebody else help sort of like coach us through, what we need to do as far as like accommodating our kid or minimizing things, as well as when anxiety is also present or in par with OCD. Those two can actually have a big part of, kind of feeling like we need to minimize things because they blow up, or they have, so much anxiety, it's unmanageable. However, with, ERP and CBT, as well as space training, a lot of families find out that they're playing a role in it, or they're getting sucked into the OCD or anxiety sort of circle, and process when they didn't know that they were. Most families, I kind of say, like, I can't fault you for doing what you were doing because you didn't know any different. But let's learn how to sort of deal with this different, because it exhausts everybody. So of course those minimizations happen, those rescuing things happen because you're just trying to survive in the moment. But it really starts to take effect and hurt in the long run. So my advice would be, again, sitting down and seeing if you are in therapy, or you currently, or your kid is in therapy for OCD and anxiety, seeing how, again, starting to set up expectations that are realistic for them to achieve while they're still doing that work, and sitting down and having that conversation, with, your kid ahead of time, that, we're going to change some things, see if it works, because what we're doing isn't working. It feels like it's not working for you, it's not working for us, and here's how we're going to approach it differently. We may not find that it works, but we're going to work on it together. We're all in this, in the same situation, and seeing what their questions and concerns are about. But really, again, that structure, predictability, and consistency is often something that when I work with a kid that has OCD and anxiety as well as depression is forming from it, I usually do take a very, very, pointed mark of talking with the parents about what are they doing separately in their role, as a treatment provider, and can find, different things that could be changed. And it's really dealing with parent anxiety too. Like, what if, I'm a bad parent, or guilt, or other things that needs to be sort of brought out, dealt with differently, but can be and successfully can get through. So I would, consider, if she's not getting help, get her to help. If she is, having more conversations about, let's start to set limits and expectations, and stop minimizing.
That's so awesome. Because as a parent, if you're not able to comfort your teen, we hear this often from families, you're not able to comfort your teen while they're going through the anxiety. It's it feels so unnatural. Like,
It feels unnatural, but here's the thing. What you're doing at that moment, if you are comforting all the time, you're not allowing them to see that they can handle an emotion, even if it is anxiety. So I usually kind of bring it out to like, are they still going to need you there when they're 40 to comfort them out of that anxiety? Or do you want them to learn as a way of like how to be a self-sufficient, independent, healthy, well-adjusted adult that anxiety is not going to kill them. It's okay. It's might be hard to see, but they need to go through it. And the more that they do, the less uncomfortable it'll be. And that really is the outcome that you want. So yes, we know it's
That's right.
distressing.
The more confidence they build in themselves, the more likely they are to move through it,
Hmm.
right?
Yep.
Okay, that's awesome. I know in your practice and your experience that you're seeing teens, and you mentioned it in your presentation, numb out with marijuana, drugs, other substances, or even gaming. And
Hmm.
I did want to let families know that up in our webinar library, we have great webinars on each of those topics. If you want to check it out, if your family is experiencing that. But what would you say to a family who might be in that situation where they definitely know their teen is numbing out with either substances or gaming?
I would first kind of look and address like the observable behavior and, the things that are going on, even if it does need to, be done in a clinical environment or even getting coaching for yourselves of like, how do I have this conversation? Um, I think in some of those ways we need to look at, what the behavior or the function of the behavior, especially when numbing out is and saying like, again, this could be distracting or numbing out from the things, that you don't want to deal with. And I would like to be able to talk with you about it. And what is this like for you when you are anxious and go into, hours of playing or, when you are, wanting to use, what does that look like for you? And, what do you think are the reasons why you do? With not judgment or criticism. We're not going to combat it, with like being judgmental, critical. We need to be curious and just listen, and be able to kind of get down to the core of the function of the behavior. Sadly enough, a lot of the things that I often see too that I didn't mention before that is something that happens quite often is the numbing out with, again, sometimes medications that are offered because it's prescribed by, our psychiatrist, such as a Xanax or a Klonopin or things like that, then it's okay to use when they're anxious. Well, in some ways it's going to take it away fast, but it's not teaching that kid, a way to deal with the behavior. So what happens when the medication's gone? How are they going to get through that? So we need to have kind of those open conversations if they are tough. We need to be able to ask, do they want support or help, or also offer our concerns and set limits of what we want to be able to have in the home as expectations. That may be like, limiting the amount of time that they're on their electronics, limiting their use of certain, things, as well as, being able to have a structured time set, or if they can't meet, kind of in that framework that we set, we're going to have some other outcomes, meaning that you do need to go into treatment. You can have a role in picking who you want to go talk to, but you need to go into treatment or where you want to go.
Awesome. You've given us so much great advice on how to help teens and how to be their advocate and their support and help them through some really tough situations. We know it's got even tougher as we've gone through
Yeah.
the pandemic and everything else that teens are facing today. So I want to thank you for your time. I did want to just let the audience know a bit more about our handbooks before we close, but we're about to the end of our time here together, and I really enjoyed it. Thank you so much.
Hmm. Thank you.
So we wanted to just let folks know we've got the individual handbooks, and parents, foster parents, and grandparents are ordering those as a very inexpensive, great resource to have in their in homes. It's at operationparent.org/shop, and you can go right to the website and order that easily. Um, Many of you might have the handbook already. You might also consider ordering for and gifting it to another family member or friend who might find it useful. We also have a special offer today for those of you that have joined us live for the webinar. Thank you so much. We know your time is super valuable, and that you've spent it with us is definitely an honor. You can get 20% off 50 or more handbooks if you are a school, church, organization that might like to do a bulk offer today. You can do that also very easily on our website by using the coupon code OFF20. That offer, we've given it a little bit more time, knowing that folks have a bit of summer mode maybe going on, or a lot of commitments right now. So that offer is a little bit longer than usual. It's going to go out till June 14th, and you can get 20% off of 50 or more, any quantity that discount will work on. Also available at Operation Parent /shop. If you've got any questions about ordering handbooks at all, you can use info@operationparent.org and send a question or two. All right, and then don't forget that we also mentioned that you're going to have some sign-up information in your follow-up emails regarding this webinar to join us for the July 26th webinar with Crystal Coyer out of Texas. Again, we're going to wrap it up here, but thanks everyone for joining us. Thanks, Dr. Terada. We'll look forward to our next time together. Thanks
Yes.
so much. Bye-bye.